Welcome back to the channel. We are so close to being able to install insulation in our cabin. However, we have a little bit of prep work left that we have to do, as well as fixing a few mistakes. And in order to continue working today, we do have one small repair that we have to do, and that's on the nail gun because it seems like it needs a little maintenance. And I wanted to answer the big question that we've kept you waiting for, and that is how many nails we've used total so far on this build.
It's only a few.
We had guesses ranging all the way from 320 nails all the way up to 1,000,000. However, the total number of nails that we've used so far between framing, sheathing, and the roofing is 30,000 nails, or 250 pounds. That number includes the 1,500 nails that were hammered in by hand for the roofing underlayment. Thank you so much to everybody who chimed in and put in their guesses on how many nails they thought that we've used so far on this build, and excellent guesses to John Corlett and Howard Anderson. You guys were both the closest guesses at 30,000 nails. We'd like you both to reach out to us via email. Our email is in the description of this video. We have a small gift for you. If we don't hear from you, we'll reach out to you from your comment on the guess. It is a little chilly out here. It's about 4 degrees Fahrenheit, so I'm gonna head inside. We're gonna get working on that nail gun.
The framing nailer worked really well throughout the entire cabin build, all the way up until we were sheathing the roof, and we had maybe about 3 or 4 nails, which they were shorter nails for the roofing, but they were not seating all the way. And I thought that was kind of strange. This winter, we ended up building a few small goat boxes. And when I was framing those, I was back to using, I think, 3.5-inch nails. And I found that they weren't driving in all the way. And I thought it was because it was so cold, because we were hovering just below 0 at that time, I believe. I thought, okay, this thing's really cold. It's just not working right. So I put it inside, warmed it up, brought it back out, still not driving the nails all the way. So I did some digging online, and it's actually a common problem that this style of nailer has to be recharged. Essentially, the air pressure in that cylinder, after so many shots, it can just start to leak past the piston and the seals in it, and it'll lose a little bit of pressure inside of there. Once that pressure is lost, it can no longer hit the nail hard enough. The big issue for me here is that this is out of warranty. I'm gonna try and recharge it. And I did a little bit of research online, and I found out that you can get a high pressure bicycle fork pump, and that will go to a high enough PSI, because it's gotta be around 200 to 220 PSI in this chamber, that should be able to recharge that cylinder. And I'm figuring if I have to do that every 30,000 shots roughly, that's not too bad. That's better than replacing it with a new one. You also have to have these little Schrader valves in order to recharge it. So I'm gonna try and get all these screws out and get it apart and figure out what's going on. Oh, there it is. Oh my gosh, it's dirty in there. So that's the air cylinder that needs recharged, but that looks like a mess. No, there's not really a good way to clean that out.
Looks a lot cleaner now on this side.
Yeah, it shouldn't technically have pressure in it. So there is still some pressure in here. There's another secondary Schrader inside of here once you take the plug out, and if I just press on it a little bit, I can hear air coming out. Pretty sure there's just not enough in there. We're gonna go ahead and get this unpacked and put one of these Schraders in and try and get it recharged and give it a shot. This is supposed to be charged to about 210 PSI. We're going to pump it up to 210 and give it a try and see how it's working. Milwaukee doesn't share what the air pressure is in this cylinder because they want you to send it back to them so they can make $100 on recharging it for you. So nobody really knows. I would have to actually get a brand new one and put a pressure gauge on here to find out what the original pressure is set at. Right now I'm only at like 60.
60? That's low.
I mean, if it only does 1 to 2 PSI per pump, we got a long ways to go, because
You get up to 200 psi.
It feels like you're gonna break the pump. Gotta be really close to 210. Wasn't so bad. This Schrader off.
It's not supposed to leak any air.
Yeah, it shouldn't leak any out because it's a double Schrader.
Yeah.
All right, I just got it all back together. I'm gonna put some nails in it and a fresh battery, and we're gonna see what happens. Hopefully it's back to working the way it should. Look at that. All the way. Actually, I can back it off some now. Perfect. I think that's about code. All right, so for $35 or $40, we fixed it. Well worth not buying a new one for $325. If I only have to do that every 30,000 nails, that's really not that bad. Apparently there's a couple other brands that are similar style that also have to be recharged. And that's better than waiting on like a delay. This thing can shoot just as fast as a regular air nailer. At least I'm pretty sure it can. It can shoot as fast as you can push it down. So now I can get started. That would give us like 6.5 from this board to here. Silly dog. We are back out here working on the cabin today, and we're trying to get everything finalized to get ready for insulation. First thing that we're tackling is a knee wall at the bottom on both sides. There's a couple reasons for doing that. By doing the knee wall, it gives us a flat spot at the bottom here that we can curve our vapor barrier and our insulation netting down to and staple along here. And if we would have tried to do that back in here up against the A-frames, it just wouldn't have worked because of the way that we engineered the bird's mouth. Usually on A-frames, at least with this slope of an A-frame, we're gonna lose about 1.5 feet of usable space on each side, which is pretty common. We could lose a little bit less room if we would have just ran this down and put blocking in here, and that was a possibility too. However, I feel like this just simplifies the space and makes it to where if we're in here cleaning, like sweeping up, or even when we're mounting everything on here, it makes it cleaner. And especially for mounting electrical sockets down this wall. So we'll be able to have a flat wall to actually put electrical sockets on instead of having them on a sloped surface like here. That little hop over the boards, that's why
Alright, sit.
get loud.
You can stay right here, but you have to stay with me.
What I'm doing here in this corner is I'm actually framing out a corner. With the way that the wall is built into the A-frames, there is no true corner. So this would not allow for anything like furring or any type of wall covering, drywall. Nothing would have a corner to screw into. By putting this 2x4 in here, we're basically mimicking the A-frames and creating a solid corner for everything to screw into. If I was ever to build another A-frame again, instead of building the A-frame 16-inch on center on the ends, I would probably make them to where they fall on the outside edge of the wall and one on the inside edge of the wall. And that would actually make it to where we don't have to do this. It would already have a corner built in because there would be an extra A-frame there. I'm going to put in a couple pieces of blocking in behind the 2x4 to stabilize it up there since it's a long run. You are probably wondering what in the heck I'm doing here because I'm cutting out the sill, changing around this framing here. Well, guys, we decided that we don't want any windows. They're just too inefficient. They lose too much heat, so we just got to get rid of them. Just kidding. We are actually reframing all 5 windows. I decided upstairs we're going to shrink both by a foot, and on the downstairs, we're going to shrink all 3 by 2 feet. The reason why we're doing that is windows are just so inefficient. A regular standard window only has an R2 value. If we go up to a triple pane, we get about R6, which is a lot better. However, the amount of surface area that we had with these size windows is pretty horrendous. That really kills the insulation value of this home. In addition to that, we also decided to change the style of the window, which we'll get into when we actually install those windows. But there's also another issue. The first one is when I was framing these windows, before I sheathed it, to frame this way, you need metal bracketry to go under the sill plate and the header plate. When I was building these walls, I had looked into those plates and I could only find ones for 2x4 studded walls in this area. I had meant to order them. It completely slipped my mind. After the sheathing was on, I realized that was my big mistake, was that I forgot to put them on. And you can't put them on once the sheathing's on because they nail into both sides of the stud and they support the inside of the corner. That way all the weight of these boards are not just on the hardware. Since they really can't be installed correctly now, and I have to move everything around anyways, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna notch this jack stud out so that the boards are actually not only supported by the nails, but they'll have weight going down on the jack studs as well. That's also gonna mean that I'm gonna need to install a king stud on the outside. That way it can't shift side to side. So the way that I'm about to do it will make it to where we don't have to have that metal bracketry. This is still considered an advanced framing technique, to where we're using less lumber to have less thermal bridging. So that's the first mistake. When we get upstairs to the upstairs windows, I'll point out why I have to move the header down on that as well, and it'll make more sense about the second mistake. One other advantage to raising these sills like this, almost a whole foot, is that it gives us the opportunity to put an appliance under here or possibly have a table up against this wall. And that's really important because on the A-frames, you run out of wall space really quick because of your side walls being sloped. You can't really put a lot up against them. Maybe like a couch, but this definitely will help with that. Since we're raising them up, it'll give us more opportunities for things to be here. Thankfully, I had not zipped this OSB out because that would have eliminated that opportunity to change this as well. We finished the downstairs windows. These two windows up here we're only shortening by about a foot. That means that we're happy with where this sill is, so we won't be moving that so that we can save on blades and not destroying all this lumber and wasting it just to get it out. We're just gonna add 2 extra cripples underneath of this to brace it instead of notching it in. But at the top, I'm gonna notch in a new header plate. I'm also going to put kings on the side to stabilize the notch. Now, the big reason why I have to do this is there's a mistake. Once I framed in these corners, I could see that there's going to be an issue with how close the frame is to the wall here. And the main problem with that is there's not enough room for trim, but also once this is all insulated and the windows are in, we are furring out these walls and adding in rigid foam on the interior in order to eliminate some of this thermal bridging. Now, a big issue with that is since the foam is about the thickness of a 2x4 or a 2x6 in this case, like I'm holding, when we go to put that foam up here, it shrinks that gap even more. And the furring will be the same depth as this as well. So you can imagine if we did that, we would have no corner up there. So that doesn't become an issue when we get to insulating that part, is we're gonna move that header down and just frame it in, similar to how we did the downstairs windows.
The heck?
That doesn't fit.
Did you grab the wrong one when you came up here?
I had to. There's only one final step to repairing this and making it work right, and that is when we cut this out for the window and they actually arrive, we will have to pull the Tyvek back a little bit and re-nail all of the sheathing back into these studs, into the extra studs, especially since we moved the upper one. And on the downstairs ones, we moved both, so we'll have to re-nail it into both while we have that Tyvek peeled back.
Before actually installing our insulation, we have to make sure that we're able to properly vapor barrier our entire structure. And one common issue with a two-story building is the floor joists between the floors actually cause an interruption in the plastic vapor barrier. So to combat that, we're using this polystyrene foam. The foam will go in between the floor joists, and what that's doing is that it's going to act as a vapor barrier in between the two floors. Essentially, what it's going to do is create a cavity to blow in the dense packed cellulose in between the two floors, and we'll be able to take our plastic vapor barrier and seal it along the bottom and the top to create a solid vapor barrier from the floor all the way to the roof. After all of the foam is installed, we are going to go through and seal any cracks or gaps, and then we'll also come back through with some spray foam and fill in any possible gaps where vapor could come through. We are also going to install blocking underneath of the foam, and that gives this foam as well as the vapor barrier somewhere to seal to and the insulation netting somewhere that we can staple it to. In addition to that, we're also going to add furring to the top floor and the bottom floor along the foam, so that way the dense packed cellulose can't push the foam out once we blow it in.
Anywhere that we plan to have a future appliance that needs to vent through the wall, such as this location where our small oil furnace will be, we are putting in this EPS foam. Now, this EPS foam is vapor permeable. That's one reason why we're putting this inside the wall. And you may have noticed I peeled the coating off in between all of these layers. That way, if there is any type of vapor or moisture buildup in here, it can technically dry out because it'll be allowed to breathe there. Our main goal is to have this nice surface that we can come back to and we can cut a hole through it with a hole saw, install the appliance vent. That way we don't have all of our loose fill, the dense packed cellulose that's in this area falling out when we try and cut through. And it'll maintain our R value. And this nice surface here will allow us to silicone down our plastic vapor barrier that's going to be over all of the walls and the ceiling.
We just went through and wired this wall for our exterior outlets and lighting, and we'll come back through at a later time and do our internal wiring. All of the internal wiring is going to be done on the furring on the inside of the vapor barrier, which is common practice here in Alaska. So that way it minimizes the amount of protrusions and air leakages coming through the vapor barrier. We do have a little bit more electrical to do. We are going to run the same type of wiring as we did up here on our back wall. We only have a few minor things left to prepare for our insulation. We are really excited to get our cabin insulated, and that should be on our next video. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon. I like how you just use the side of the hammer.
It works.